Being Native is really hard for a million different reasons, and we all have our own stories to tell, and I have mine, and that's really the foundation for why I wrote this book, Who Gets to Be Indian. It's a very personal story, and one of the goals for writing the book was to share a very personal story that would be relatable, because I know that my experience is, while it's unique to me, it's not unusual as somebody who has struggled with their identity for most of my life. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I'll share with you a few of those reasons. And it goes back to where my mother came from. My mom was an enrolled member of the Colville Confederated Tribes, which is in Washington State. And her mother, her name was Mabel Dizitel, so that's one of the largest families on the reservation, and so I come directly from that family. She had come to LA during that time, which was termination, and she didn't come for relocation like on a relocation voucher, but it was during that era when people were migrating from reservation communities to large cities. A lot of the times they were coming on for this relocation program, but that was not my mom's experience. She had spent some of her childhood growing up on the reservation, but not a lot of it. Grandma had spent her whole childhood there until she was sent away to Chimawa, to the boarding school, along with her brothers, Uncle Vern and Uncle John. And I didn't know that story until I was in my early 30s, and that was in the early 90s, when Uncle Vern told me about that experience. And by then he was 75 years old, and it was during the time when people really didn't talk about that boarding school experience openly like they do now. And so he told me this horrific story that kind of blew my mind, and it was life-changing for me, what he told me, and what I now call a textbook boarding school story. And that's what he and Uncle John and my grandma had lived through. So it's, their lives are shaped by the trauma of that, and that's what shapes my mom's life as well. And that this is what I'm born into as a Native person, even somebody with a mixed ethnicity, as much as mine is. And so my dad was 100% Sicilian American. His parents were immigrants from Sicily when they were young, and so I come from this very culturally mixed background. But it's my mother's life that really shaped who I am, because I was so identified with being Native, and I was raised hearing this this phrase, "Be proud that you're Indian." And I was, but I just didn't know what it meant to be Indian when I was growing up in Los Angeles during this time. And so this became the background for who I am today. So when I use the word struggle about my identity, what I'm really talking about is my anxiety about not being enrolled in my tribe. So I said that my mom was an enrolled member, and she was, and I come from a long line of people who were mixed blood and full blood Indians going back countless generations. And here I am, not able to meet the enrollment criteria because of blood quantum. So even though I'm very connected to my tribe, I'm very culturally involved to the extent that I can be, living 1,500 miles away in Southern California, but learning my language and just doing as much as I can to stay active culturally. It's still my experience as a Native person of being an urban Native person, living in the ancestral lands of other tribes. But it's because of blood quantum that I cannot be an enrolled member unless the tribe, the Colvilles, decide to change their enrollment criteria and either lower the blood quantum or abolish it altogether. I will always be in that liminal space. And that's the source of a lot of pain for me. And I know that I'm not alone. There's so many other ways that somebody can be legitimately Native but not be enrolled. Fortunately, for me, the Colvilles actually have a process for acknowledging their descendants by issuing a document. So I'm documented, and that documentation entitles me to some kinds of services, like Indian Health Service, and some benefits, tribal benefits, but it's not membership or citizenship in the tribe. And there are so many other ways that you can be caught in that gray zone, that liminal space of belonging and not belonging at the same time. You can be disenrolled from your tribe and not have that official, belonging status. You could be adopted. There are so many people with that experience. I have 3 siblings. My mom had 3 children before I was born that I didn't even know about entirely until like 3 years ago or so. And they have that experience. You can be from a tribe that is not federally recognized, or maybe once was and was terminated. And that's a really common experience here in California. So there's so many ways. There are so many stories I've heard from people about how they don't officially belong to their tribes. And, I want to just acknowledge that space and the kind of pain that you can live with. This is about feeling like you're not enough. It's the experience of not being fully Native for some purposes, but not being non-Native either. So it's this netherworld of non-belonging, belonging and non-belonging at the same time. And so when I say the word struggle, it's really about being in that limited space where you have to figure out where you fit in. Part of my struggle was also about the alcoholism in our family. I knew that my mother was an alcoholic. I had seen it my entire life, and I didn't really understand it. And the goal to understand who my mother was really drove my journey into understanding who I was, because she had a lot of secrets. And by the time I was in my early 30s and connected with my uncles on the reservation, I had lots of questions, and they really helped me to figure that out. My life was about getting to the bottom of who I was and trying to sort all of that out and understand myself as a Native person. It was very important to me to figure all of that stuff out. And that's really what led me down the path that I am now on as an educator and a writer, and somebody who is dedicated to helping other people figure out who they are. And so that's what this book really is about. It comes from this very personal experience, and my goal for it is to intentionally be vulnerable, to tell the story of my own struggle. And there are a lot of people who, in fact, I would say most of the people that I've met in my life who are Native, and that's a lot of people, have some kind of story of struggle with their identity. And it's really my goal to help people feel like they're not alone, and at the same time to understand where we're at right now, at a time where we are so inundated in the society with ethnic fraud. We have people who desperately want to be Native, despite not having a lived experience about being Native, a lot of times it's just the experience of having a family story of that mysterious Indian ancestor in the family tree that then gets blown into an entire identity, sometimes multi-generational. And we all know the phenomenon. It was only through learning about the truth of the past and what had happened to us collectively that I could understand myself, but also be able to frame it for other people who are also struggling to find the answers to their lives. I was writing as a journalist, what I call a grassroots journalist, and that's what led me back to school. He's at the University of New Mexico. And so I got out and I continued along my path to become a writer. So I was writing for Indian Country Today. And that's when I have this experience with Sacheen Littlefeather. And I'm not going to retell that story here because I've told it in other videos. But it's that experience with her that sends me ultimately down the road to writing this book, because I was in the possession of information that I knew was really crucial to understanding this phenomenon of pretendianism. Like, nobody in their right mind wants to write a book about Native identity because it's so difficult, it's so contentious and fraught. And I don't like to be the person that talks about this stuff, but I felt like I was being given a responsibility because I was in possession of this knowledge. And it's something that we can learn from as we understand what this phenomenon of Native race shifting and self-indigenization and ethnic fraud, all these different terms that we use. And even though it's really difficult, I wanted to tackle it. And it's very challenging, and not everybody wants to talk about it. My goal in writing the book was to create an artifact that will be a way for us to construct a conversation, maybe a different way for us to talk about what it means to be Native in all these different manifestations and all these different kinds of experiences that we have, from disenrollment to those who inhabit or who have taken on wrongfully a Native identity based on an experience that is not a lived experience, is not something that is authentic and real. So it's just a starting place, and I want to be able to have a conversation and open up a space for other people to talk about their own lived experience in a way that will ideally be helpful for others in their own struggles. I hope this book will be helpful to you as an individual, helpful for tribes, helpful for institutions as they figure out strategies of how to vet people and their claims to indigeneity. These are all very real problems when there are resources at stake, limited resources that are meant for actual Native people, and we have people claiming to be Native that don't necessarily have any kind of lived experience or documentation about who they are. That's a problem. And institutions are now finding themselves in the position of having to figure this out, because what we're doing now, which is nothing, is not working. I hope that you will find it useful. I hope that institutions will find it useful, and that we'll be able to get on the other side of this so that we can get to accountability. That's what this is about, the need for transparency and accountability for people who have claims to being Natives. And I hope that the book will be seen in that light and will be used in these ways. Thanks for listening.